We're almost done with the GX era, folks. Only one more archetype after this to go. This is the Simorgh archetype, which officially wasn't an archetype until very recently after the recent support in Rising Rampage, and was used by the monster spirit Sky Scout from the Season 3 again. And yeah, I only used one card from that archetype from a grand total of 3 at the time, of course, but now it's a 15 card archetype, and let's see what makes these birds fly in the first place, starting first with the level 1 Simorgh Bird of Beginnings. When this card is normal summoned, you can activate this effect. During your main phase this turn, you can normal summon one Simorgh monster in addition to your normal summon or set. You gain this effect once per turn. If your opponent controls no cards in their spell and trap zones while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card in defense position but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot summon monsters for the rest of this turn except winged beast monsters. You can only use each effect of Simorgh Bird of Beginnings once per turn. So yeah, this basically ran at 3 at all times because it's a 1-for-1 target. It gives you an additional normal summon. What's not to like? Although that additional normal summon has to be a Simorgh monster. But then again, any effect that gives you an additional normal summon is absolutely kick-ass in my opinion. So yeah, this one continues the legacy. However, it has actually also has a neat summoning condition. That being, if the opponent has no back row, you are able to special summon it from the graveyard, which might sound restrictive at first, but there is actually a monster which actually helps out with that fact, and yeah, we'll get to that later. It's one of their best monsters of all time, one of the best monsters period, so yeah. The Simorgh Bird of Beginnings is absolutely ran at 3 at all times, not to mention it has fantastic defense values for a level 1 monster, so yeah, this is a good card. Next up we have the level 2 Simorgh Bird of Summoning. When this card is normal summoned, you can add one Simorgh card from your deck to your hand except Simorgh Bird of Summoning. If your opponent controls no cards in their spell and trap zone while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card in defense position but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot summon monsters for the rest of this turn except winged beast monsters. You can only use each effect of Simorgh Bird of Summoning once per turn. Here we have an even better card. Upon summoning, you are allowed to search out another Simorgh card. And not to mention it also has the graveyard resummoning just like the Bird of Beginnings. And yeah. It's a level 2, decent stats for a level 2. Blocks you into Winged Beast, which is kind of restrictive, but not too restrictive since your deck is probably going to be filled up with Winged Beasts and all that since you're playing this archetype. And yeah, this also should be ran at 3 at all times. Their next up monster is the level 3 Simorgh Bird of Endings. When this card is normal summoned, you can send one Simorgh card from your deck to your graveyard except Simorgh Bird of Endings. If your opponent controls no cards in their spell and trap zones while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card in defense position but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for this turn except winged beast monsters, and you can only use each effect once per turn. So yeah, I can kind of see now that the archetype is built around resummoning itself from the graveyard, and I actually kind of like it. Now this actually acts as an Armageddon Knight for the archetype, and a pretty good one, and that since it sends wind monsters most of the time into the graveyard. So yeah, it's okay. It's another very nice card. Yeah, basically sets up the graveyard, and of course it should be ran at 2 or 3, because it's just that good. Next up we have Simorgh Bird of Protection. Their first level 4. Their only level 4 actually. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one card in your opponent's spell and trap zone, return it to the hand. If your opponent controls no cards in their spell and trap zones while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it in defense position but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, same restrictions. Okay, so again, this is some sort of bouncing back row removal cards, and it actually works okay. It's not the best, but it actually works pretty well. And I wouldn't advise maxing out on it because, again, there is a certain monster which, when opened up with it and during the first turn, can make a very formidable back row lock. So yeah, the use for this thing is not needed as much as the previous three, but it's still worth running at least one or two. And their next monster is actually the very first monster ever to exist, that being Simorgh, Bird of Divinity, the level 7, their first tribute monster. And this card cannot be special summoned. If you tribute summon this card, all tributes must be wind. Each player takes 1000 damage during each of their end phases while this card remains face up on the field. And this damage is decreased by 500 for each spell and trap the player controls. So yeah, the first monster was designed to be a generic wind boss monster, typical GX era burn card, and for all intents and purposes nowadays I wouldn't actually advise running this because it doesn't really benefit the archetype that much, and it actually goes against the logic of the archetype to an extent, because, well, if the opponent controls no back row, which is kind of the goal of the archetype, it burns it for 1000 damage, but again, there are cards in the archetype which are focused on preventing the opponent for not having any back row, while this card relies on him constantly not having back row, which is not too easy to set up sometimes. So yeah, run at 1 if you really feel like it. However, one of the archetype's best monsters is actually a dark counterpart to this card, that being Dark Simorgh. Has the same stats as as Simorgh, Bird of Divinity, except it's a dark monster this time around. And its effect is the following: while face up on the field, this card is also a wind attribute, which of course synergizes with the archetype. And you can banish one dark monster and one wind monster from your graveyard to special summon this card from your hand, and you can banish one dark and wind monster from your hand to special summon this card from the graveyard. So yeah, the first effect was actually a classification effect, kind of like Light and Darkness Dragon, along with a very unique and weird summoning condition. However, the last part of the effect is actually what makes this card a staple in many lockdown decks ever since it came out. Your opponent cannot set any cards on the field. That means you also cannot set monsters in defense position, meaning your opponent entirely all the time has to summon monsters in attack position, or else, you know, he can't do anything. Because yeah, so yeah, this was actually used in various lockdown decks in order to chip away at the opponent's life points very easily. So yeah, this was one of the first 3 Simorgh cards ever created before Rising Rampage came along. We'll get to the third one very soon. It's actually not worth running. So yeah, Dark Simorgh is the best old school Simorgh card ever to exist. And he actually received a retrain, that being the level 8 Darkness Simorgh. And it's their only other dark attribute monster, and while face up on the field, it's also a wind attribute. You can only use one of the following effects of Darkness Simorgh once per turn. If you tribute summon a dark or wind monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard if it was there when you summoned it, or hand even if not. When a spell or trap or effect is activated to quick effect, you can attribute one winged beast monster, negate the activation. If you do, destroy that card. And yeah, also has a the special summoning condition is not as great as Dark Simorgh, the regular one. However, the second effect, which we'll probably use more often, is actually very good because it's actually the closest thing that the archetype has to an Omni negation. So yeah, in monster form that is, because we still haven't went to the spell and trap support yet. So yeah, this is actually a nice retrain, although not better in all aspects from the regular Dark Simorgh. If you run Dark Simorgh at 3, Darkness Simorgh should be ran at 1 or 2. So yeah. Bird of Divinity also received a retrain, that being Simorgh, Lord of the Storm, also a level 8 with the same stats as Darkness Simorgh. And your opponent cannot target this tribute summoned card with spell or trap effects or monster effects, and you can only use each effect of Simorgh, Lord of the Storm once per turn. Yeah, it has the first effect is the exact same as the Darkness Simorgh, although instead of destroying it, spins it back into the deck, which is actually miles better. And when a winged beast monster is destroyed by battle while this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card to your hand. Again, now the second effect is basically something you will never ever use unless, well, actually it's a recyclable trade-in target if we really want to stretch it there. That's the only relevant usage I can think of when talking about the second effect. However, the first effect is actually something you most likely are gonna prefer over Darkness Simorgh, because spinning removal is actually more value than the regular destruction removal, so you should have more potent strategies in negation when you actually do prefer running this. So yeah, that's a very nice card. Their last card is the very last first wave of support in massive quotation marks of the Simorgh archetype. That being Simorgh, Bird of Ancestry. Another level 8 which actually has the same stats as Darkness Simorgh and Simorgh, Lord of the Storm. And both players contribute summon wind monsters with one less tribute than required. If you tribute summon this card by tributing only wind monsters, return up to 2 cards from your opponent controls to the owner's hand. This card is treated as a normal monster while in your hand. Okay, so I'm actually gonna get the last effect out of the way, as in the normal thing, the normal monster thing in your hand. This part of the effect only exists because of a monster known as Wind Effigy, which can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a normal wind monster. And the fact of the matter is that there is not a single normal wind monster that is a level 7 or higher. Yeah, why they bother printing it? So yeah, they made this thing's effect, made this thing's last effect what it is because of they wanted to promote Dark Effigy? I don't know. However, this is actually not going to be summoned with 2 tributes, because yeah, you contribute 1 monster for this card tribute summoned, which is lovely, and then it offers targeting non-targeting double bouncing removal, which is amazing. However, not too amazing, because this thing can clog up your hand quite a bit unless you're running trade-in. So yeah, run 1 or 2 if you feel like it, and run 3 if you're if you have a trade-in engine available to you. Alright, those were all the monsters. Now it's time for their spell and traps. Alright, their first spell is the field spell Elbort's Sacred Peak of Simorgh. All winged beast monsters on the field gain 300 attack and defense. You can only use each of the following effects of Elbort's Sacred Peak of Simorgh once per turn. You can reveal 1 level 5 or higher winged beast monster in your hand. This turn you can normal summon winged beast monsters for 1 less tribute, even if this card leaves the field. If you control a winged beast monster, you can immediately after this card effect resolves, normal summon 1 winged beast monster. So yeah, both of these effects are very sweet, especially the second one. The first one is not going to be used that often because you're mostly going to be special summoning the high level monsters instead of tribute summoning. However, the second effect is going to be used very often because it's not limited to Simorgh monsters, so you can basically summon any winged beast monsters which you probably want to run in your engine, because you can actually splash in Mist Valleys, Harpies. You can actually build a Divine Wind variant with this if you feel like it. So yeah, this is actually definitely a trio of staple in any Simorgh build. Their next card is the Simorgh Arrival, their first normal spell. Discard 1 winged beast monster, add 2 Simorgh monsters with different attributes from your deck to your hand. You can banish this card from your graveyard, reveal 1 winged beast monster in your hand, and if you do, reduce the levels of monsters in your hand with the same name by 1 for the rest of this turn, even after they are summoned or set. You can only activate 1 Simorgh Arrival per turn. This is actually a fantastic piece of support, which actually searches out Dark Simorgh and any Simorgh card you, well, basically would like at that moment, which is actually very, very lovely, and makes the Dark Simorgh very easier to summon. And yeah, all in all, it's a very fantastic card. However, it's a bit of a bummer that you can only activate 1 of them per turn. which is kind of understandable because this level of searching, if it wasn't limited to one per turn, would be kind of broken. So yeah, I understand. Still though, max out on this because it's a fantastic piece of support. Next up we have their final spell card, Simorgh Rejection. Discard one winged beast monster, return all cards in your opponent's spell and trap zones to the hand. You can banish this card from your graveyard, reveal one winged beast monster in your hand, and if you do, reduce the levels of the monsters in your hand with the same name by 1 for the rest of this turn, even after their normal summon set, and you can only activate one of these per turn. Okay, so this is an archetypal giant Trunade, but only for your opponent, so it's actually very good. However, I do not like how it also has the graveyard banishing effect where you can reduce the levels of Simorgh monsters. However, they can be only with the same name for and just like the previous one, but it's not that good, to be honest. It's just there because you can. I mean, you can make it so that you can summon high-level monsters with one less tribute, but that's Bird of Ancestry does the same thing constantly if it's on the field, so these effects are kind of redundant. So yeah, again, if you run Dark Simorgh, then you shouldn't have any problems with running more than 2 of these. So yeah, this is usually ran at 1 or 2 at best. Next up we have their final card, that being the continuous trap, Simorgh Storm's Fort. When your opponent's monsters cannot target winged beast monsters you control for attacks, except a winged beast monster you control with the highest attack, either if tied. Your opponent cannot target winged beast monsters you control with card effects, except winged beast monster you control with the highest attack, either if tied. You can send 2 Simorgh monsters whose original levels are 7 or higher with different original attributes and discard you control to the graveyard. Return as many cards on the field as possible to the hand, and if you do, take 500 damage for each card returned to the hand, then inflict damage to opponent equal to the damage you took. You can only use this effect of Simorgh Storm Fort once per turn. Okay, is the burn damage the reminiscent of the GX era because they wanted to like signify that this archetype comes from the GX era? Because that's the only relevant point about the burn damage I can actually make. I don't know what the burn damage was about, but the bouncing is actually very sweet. It not only bounces back row, but any card on the field, which is very lovely. Due to it being a continuous trap, you don't necessarily need to run 3 of these, so 2 should be perfectly fine because you need room for other playmakers. So yeah, those were Simorghs, and now it's time for the grading scale. Their consistency is fairly admirable due to them being wind monsters, and they can often open up very well due to their first 3 monsters being fantastic pieces of support. And yeah, they can usually produce very okay and decent first turn boards if they open up very well, which is again the generic winged beast and beast warrior support doesn't help much with the regular consistency. Horn of the Phantom Beast also can be a thing, so yeah, 2 out of 3 is perfectly acceptable here. Now power output is not actually that good because none of them have very spectacular high attack values unless we're talking about the 2 tribute monsters, which are usually there to maintain the lockdown, and yeah, they usually want to be brought out as fast as possible, and yeah, they have the potential to have hit really hard, but but the swarming can be a bit too finicky at times to get them out onto the field, so that's another 2 out of 3. Comeback ability can be fairly devastating because one of their best monsters have the very neat resummoning effects from the graveyard, so that could be used as well. The Divine Wind is also a thing. Harpy Dancer can also provide some additional benefits, so yeah, 2 out of 3 as well. Protection is not something they actually have a bragging point to, because there simply isn't any. I mean, Lord of the Storm and Darkness Simorgh have decent omni-negation effects, so there, it's there. And the Simorgh Stormfort actually also has a decent protection effect, but it's not enough for me to bump it to any more than 1 out of 3. As for this versatility, I have to give him a 3 out of 3 because these things are extremely splashable in various wind builds, those being Divine Wind, Mist Valley, Harpies, anything wind related, even Yosenjus. So yeah, Simorghs are actually a very splashable wind archetype, which I like to see a continuation of because yeah, I really like these the wind themed back row splashing removal because Dark Simorgh is actually one of my favorite cards of all time due to what he simply does and everything. So yeah, Simorgh actually, they did good to wait this long to turn Simorgh into a proper archetype, because if they waited any shorter than that, then maybe we could have had a very disappointing GX era archetype in that regard. Regardless, this was actually a very fun video to make, and yeah, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, and updates, comment, like, and subscribe, and as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all, have a good day, and peace!